After this one, hello everyone. My name is Alex, and we ended up doing expressionism.
Hey everyone, my name is Atulia Nair.
Hi, my name is Ashley Contreras.
So, expressionism was a 20th century art movement that focused on emotion over realism. Instead of trying to paint the world accurately, artists distorted forms and used bold colors to show their inner feelings. This movement was influenced by the anxiety and instability of people felt during rapid changes in modern society. Expressionist artists were more interested in communicating mood, symbolism, and personal experience rather than realistic detail. Now, the historical context of this movement uh, was that this movement was developed around 1904 and 1914 in Germany and Austria. This was a time of major social technological change. Industrialization created crowded and stressful cities, and people were feeling increasing uncertainty and fear. At the time, psychology was becoming more influential, which encouraged artists to explore more emotional states. Right before World War One, tensions were building up in Europe, and that anxiety appeared in a lot of expressionist art. Two major groups formed during this time. Die Brook, which was focused on raw emotion and urban tension, and Dear Blah Rider, which explored spirituality and symbolic color. So the two artists I picked personally was Franz Marc and Ernest Ludwig Kirchner. Franz Marc was a German painter and one of the key founders of the Blue Rider group. He's known for painting animals instead of people because he felt animals represented purity and emotional honesty. Mark is an important figure in this movement because he used bright symbolic colors and soft, simplified shapes to show emotion rather than realism. His work focused a lot on harmony between animals and nature. The first painting I picked was Blue Horse 1, painted in 1911. In this painting, Mark uses bright and unnatural colors to communicate emotion. The blue colors symbolize spirituality and calmness for him. The horse is simplified with soft curves, giving it peaceful and gentle feeling. The colorful background creates harmony around the figure. This painting is a great example of how Mark expresses inner emotion through symbolic color instead of realistic representation. The next painting I chose from him was The Large Blue Horses, painted in the same year, 1911. This painting shows three large horses together, which creates a sense of unity and strength. Mark uses symbolic colors and shapes that are simplified and rounded. The bright blue contrasts with the warm reds and yellows in the background, giving the painting energy. The curved lines help create a rhythmic, flowing feeling, which reflects expressionism through its emotional intensity and symbolic color choices. The last painting I picked from him was The Fate of the Animals in 1913. This painting is a lot more darkened compared to his other two paintings. Here, he uses sharp, jagged lines and strong, contrasting colors to demonstrate fear and destruction. This was around the time World War One was ramping up. Many historians think his work reflects the rising tensions of that rising tension of war. The animals look trapped, overwhelmed, and the whole composition feels chaotic and unstable. It shows how expressionism could also express anxiety and emotional turmoil. The next artist was Ernest Ludwig Kircher, and he was a founding member of the Diver group. His work focuses on modern city experience, the emotional impact of urban life. Kirchner played a major role in German expressionism. He uses sharp lines, intense colors, exaggerated figures to express psychological tension and alienation in his work. Much of his work captures the anxiety of living in fast-paced modern cities. The first artwork I picked from him was Street Berlin, painted in 1913. This painting shows the overwhelming atmosphere of the city life in Berlin. The figures are elongated, angular, which makes the scene feel more tense and more uncomfortable. The bright, harsh colors create emotional intensity, and the crowded composition adds to the sense of anxiety. Kirchner wasn't trying to show a realistic street scene. He wanted to show the emotional experience of being in a busy and personal city. Next painting I picked was Self Portrait as a Soldier, painted in 1915. This painting was created during World War I, showing Kirchner with a severed hand, not because he was actually injured, but to symbolize his fear of losing his identity and ability as an artist. His hollow eyes, sharp lines, and tense posture all show emotional distress. The contrast between the soldier figure and the nude in the background suggests a loss of creativity and confidence. This is one of Kirchner's most personal and psychological works. And the last painting I picked from him is called Five Women on the Street, painted in 1913. In this painting, the women appear mask-like and detached. Kirchner exaggerates their shapes and uses harsh colors to create emotional discomfort. The dark clothing contrasts with bright green background, and the crowded composition suggests alienation and tension in the city. This painting reflects Kirchner's interest in showing the psychological impact of urban environments. These are the scholarly sources I use for my research, including the Art Store, Britannica, and museum collections that document the artists, their artworks, and the Expressionism movement.
Okay, so my two artists were Eric Heckel and Marianne von Werfken, and I'm going to speak about their key works. Okay, so Eric Heckel was a German painter, and he was the co-founder of Die Brücke, or the Bridge Group, one of the two groups in the Expressionist era. And he was in art competitions in the 1928 and 1932 Summer Olympics. He was also a major figure of the early 20th century German Expressionism. He often used woodcuts and printmaking in his works, also bold colors, and he preferred to be simple over accurate when he painted his forms, like human forms. He also loved to paint landscapes, and also the group that he was in, they preferred to divert from the traditional artwork and do something a little bit more unique to express the times of uncertainty. Like we said, this era was before World War One, so there was like times of urbanization, and it was just like a time of uncertainty. So they wanted to express that throughout their artwork. So yeah. Okay, so the first paint artwork that I wanted to do by him was House in Doncaster, so White House, and it was made in 1908. So the representation of Expressionism you can see through the bold brushstrokes in like the sky and the trees and all, and you can see how there's like also clashing colors in like the windows. There's like orange and green, and that also is like a non-naturalistic color of windows. So you can see how he expressed expressionism through there. And he wanted to create the cold sunlight of Germany's North Sea coast. So, which is why he used like a wide array, like wide shades and hues of blue in the sky. And the house is also simple, as you can see, which is moving away from the realism art styles that were before the era of Expressionism. Um, Visually, you can see that the White House stands out against like the rainbow, pretty colorful background. So I would say that's like more of an emphasis. You can also see the horizontal strokes and the multiple shades of green that make up the nature, like the trees up here. That adds a little bit of depth to the artwork. And the background colors are very vibrant and used to depict a clear afternoon in the North Sea coast, as I said earlier. So, okay, so This is another of his artworks. It's called Rock Whale. It was made in 1917. So he also used intense, unnatural colors. And you can see the distorted form right here. It conveys emotion, like it's very, like a human wouldn't like, it's a very unnatural form. So that expression of the figure, it conveys turmoil and anxiety, which is a common emotion in Expressionism. Also, tragedy is a common theme in Expressionism, and this painting is actually inspired by the tragic novel Titan by John Paul. It was made in like 1800 to 1803. It was like four works, like four separate works into one big work, and it was about this guy who named Brickell. He was like one of the characters, and one of his main characteristics was self-destruction. So Haeckel painted something that was inspired by the emotions of that one character in that book. So visually, you can see how the bright background contrasts with the person's solemn facial expression. You can also see, like, in the background, there's like energetic, almost like kind of messy brushstrokes that represents like the spontaneity of Expressionism. And you can also see blue and orange kind of makes the background a little bit more unified. And like I said earlier, the figure is kind of in like an unnatural pose. So maybe like the viewer's first impression of the work is like curiosity and maybe like uncertainty, maybe why the figure is doing that. So yeah. So this is another one of the Haeckel's artworks that kind of portray like the sad, like uncertain emotions in Expressionism artwork. So this is called Fields, Felder, and it was made in 1912. So also you can see the emotional intensity of the colors of the fields, the contrasting colors of the sky and the land, like the blue skies, whether like the versus the more earthy tones in like the foreground, and then the distorted landscapes is a key characteristic of Expressionism. Like everything you see is like a little bit more towards the unnatural state. Represents isolation and struggle, another key theme of Expressionism. And in the foreground, you can see it's a little bit more harmony, like lighter. And then when you go, I don't know, the background is a little bit more harmonic. And then the foreground is a little bit like that destruction, kind of isolation. And visually, you can see that there are quick brush strokes again, the sunny disposition. That knee chest position that the figure in the front is doing, you can maybe see how they're doing like deep thinking or despair. The colorless plants in the background, like the fields around them, maybe can represent desolacy, maybe like lifeless around them. And the composition can also invoke maybe feelings of sadness and sympathy in the viewer, wondering why like the figure is doing that pose, like what made them. So you can question it like that. Yeah. So my second artist is a painter called Marion von Werfgen. She was also a German painter, and she was a co-founder of the New Artists Association Munich group in 1909, and she was of Russian nobility. She was a important female figure of the 20th century German Expressionism, and she was a pioneer of German female artists in the 20th century. So her style was that she used color to evoke a spiritual state or feeling. She also drew some influences from the symbolist movement. That's also like emotion inspired artwork. She liked to use diagonal lines, elongated faces, more distortion, and she also liked theater. Like she was very theatrical. So she liked theatrical composition, like isolated figures. Okay, so her first artwork is self-portrait. This was made in like 1910 to 1911. So also you can see how there's like bold brush strokes in like the face to kind of highlight her cheekbones and like her forehead. And then also there's like an unnatural use of color to represent like her features. There's like reds, blues, not really found in like realistic depiction of humans. The portrait face is simple and not accurate to like a real proportion of the face. And Werfgen painted this to represent her inner truth, which is another characteristic of Expressionism. Visually, you can see there's like an untrusting, almost kind of angry expression on von Werfgen's face. You can see how there's like blue in the background, maybe a little green to represent like the sad emotions she is feeling. And the expression of her face can be interpreted as like a mask for daily life. Maybe on the outside, she's kind of portraying this like stoic, kind of untrusting facade. So, yeah. So, The Rag and the Bone Man, it was also a work by von Werfgen. So, and it was made in 1917. So, how it represents Expressionism, its emotion is preferred over realism in Expressionist works. And you can really see how there's like darkness in this work. The use of dark colors, kind of like a stormy, ominous feeling. And then again, use of unnatural color. There's like harsh lines that separate the land and sea on the bottom of the work, like or like in the middle of the work, I would say. And then the figure that conveys unsureness, struggle, and the figure is also not proportionate, another characteristic, because his legs are like unnaturally long, and like his form is like unnaturally long, and it's not proportionate. So visually, you can see how that figure is kind of moving with urgency, getting away from the ominous background. And you can see how the von Werfgen uses upward lines to create like detail and shadow in the mountains. And the gray and orange upward strokes can create like a dark and gloomy background to represent like the late afternoon or like nighttime, I would say. Yeah, late afternoon or like nighttime. And then the contrast in the dark in the water on the right side might imply mystery, something maybe like dark and gloomy below, just for the viewer to think about it a little bit more. So, yeah, that's one of her other works. So, Storm Winds was another one of her works towards, I would say, the end of this era, 1915 to 1917. So representation of Expressionism, she uses bold color for the in, bright place contrasts the dark background of the outside. You can see how there's like a little bit of tension in the windy trees. She creates like wind in the picture by making it kind of distorted or like a little bit, distorted. So the storm can also represent the inner emotions of the artist, emotion being a key characteristic of Expressionism. Destruction and chaos is also represented throughout the storm. And you can see the quick brushstrokes represents the stormy disposition of the painting. Customers kind of seem like quick and eager to escape the storm. Plants are kind of painted black to represent the nighttime, and the composition can invoke feelings of curiosity in the viewer and maybe hope for the people to be, I guess, safe in that inn throughout the storm. So, yeah. So, those are other expressionists or inspired works. So, you can see The Scream, 1893 by Edvard Munch, The Whirlwind, that's also another one of Marian von Werfgen's work, and of course the famous Starry Night Sky, 1889 by Vincent van Gogh. Those two are more famous works, and that's by Marian von Werfgen. So we do have one more part of the slides, or like we have one more chapter, but I would say my closing statement on Expressionism is that it was a fascinating era to research about. We learned many techniques of painters in this era and saw how they really thought outside the box to convey their many feelings about life and current events around them. And this is a list of like work museums that have expressionist works. So I got one around the world. I got some in Houston, and then online exhibits if you don't want to travel or anything like that. And then that's my bibliography for Eric Hickel and Marian von Rifkin.
All right, hi everyone. I hope you're doing well. I'll be presenting two expressionist artists, that is Carl Smith and Helene Funk. I'll explain who they are, why they're important, and I will describe three artworks by each painter. So in the next slide, we'll see who is Mr. Carlos, which um he was one of the founders of Die Brücke, a major expressionist group that rejected realism and focused on emotion, bold color, and simplified forms. At first, his artwork was rejected by the Nazis, that's like a fact, which banned him from exhibiting the artworks. But after the war, his work received more recognition around the world and his strong emotion expressions and his style in general. Um, so then I will be explaining about the artworks. As first, I have the self-portrait with head of 1910. This painting shows himself with the confidence and intensity. The portrait is not realistic. Instead, he uses strong black outlines and very bright and natural colors to express emotions. His features are angular and simplified, showing his move toward abstraction. There is no depth in the background. It's flat, so all attention stays on the figure. Through these choices, he expresses the modern artist's inner self rather than the traditional likeness. Then, as the second one, so y'all can see it's Houses at Nine, 1912. In this artwork, Mr. Carl transformed a simple village into a dramatic, emotional scene. The houses are reduced to sharp, geometric shapes, and the sky is painted in deep, expressive blues. The spaces it's like flat, as you can see, it's a typical of expressionism. The strong contrast between dark sky and the bright houses creates this tense nighttime mood. And the painting focuses on how the place feels emotionally and not like how it looks in real life, basically. Then on my third artwork that I'm be describing, it's a woman in the back with 1915. Um, this is a portrait of a woman who shows through emotional expression that are rather than realistic details. Her body and her face are made with bold, angular lines, and the colors are strong blacks of so y'all can see like blue, blacks, some green, and red, it's likely browns. And the background is almost empty, which keeps the focus on the figure itself. And her facial features have um like mask like look like with the brushstrokes are thick and expressive, giving the portrait strength and intensity. Then my second artist is Miss Helene Frank. Um see. Okay. She was an Austrian German expressionist painter, but she was born in 1869. She was one of the few women working in expressionism. And her art focuses strongly on woman identity, emotion, and intimate scenes. Her work is important because she portrayed women with dignity, strength, and individuality, breaking away from traditional female representation. Her Miss Helene, she used vivid colors, simplified forms, and expressive brushstrokes, combining influences with Fauvism and German Expressionism. She died in 1957, and today she's recognized as important, previously overlooked artist in modern art history. I'll explain about the first artwork that I have here in my presentation. That it's Dreams, 1913. As we can see, this artwork shows several women in quiet, like in a dreamlike moment, and she focuses on the emotion and inner thoughts rather than realism. The figure shares a sense of unity and introspection. The colors and the soft brushstrokes create like a calm and a dreamlike atmosphere. And this place, it's like flat, and the sharps are very simplified, just emphasizing the mood over the details. Then as my second on the second slide, I have The Girl with Lilies 1930. Um, this portrait shows a young woman holding lilies, which symbolize purity and feminine, and she highlights the girl inner emotions rather than focusing on perfect realism. The brushstrokes are soft and layered, creating like a peaceful mood, and the lilies are simplified into expressive shapes, keeping the focus on the symbolism. Her process involves slowly layering colors blocks to shape the figure of the flowers. And then the third one is the three women. This piece represents three women together, symbolizing connection, identity, and the feminine strength. Their gestures and the objects they hold give this scene symbolic meaning. Poses uses bold color, contrast, and simplified lines to express emotion. And as y'all can see, the background is like flat as well, and with very minimal drawing attention into the woman. And her painting process involved building the composition with the strong colors blocks before adding the details. So as a conclusion, these both artists they play important roles in the expressionism, but in very different way, as y'all can see. Like Mr. Carl, he used bold and very intense emotional expressions, using like a strong lines and very dramatic colors. And then painter Helene expressed quieter, like intimate emotions, especially in her portrayals of women, like using more soft brush work and symbolic colors. But both of them, they show the diversity and the depth of expressionist movement. And here I got some citations. I like where I got all this like information. It was kind of like a very fun assignment just to see and to see how different these artists were, but like by the same using the same movement and the same ideas.